August 9, 1928. Leavenworth Penitentiary, Kansas. A guard slides a pencil and paper through the bars. Inside, a man sits in silence. A murderer. A ghost in flesh. He takes the pencil and begins to write. He doesn't ask for mercy. He doesn't beg for help. He only wants the world to know what he did, and why. He says, "I hate the world. And I will kill again if I can." This isn't fiction. This is Carl Panzram. He killed dozens. Across countries. Across years. And no one believed him, until it was too late. He was made in pain. Forged in hate. And his words still echo from a prison cell. This is his real story. Unbelievable true story. Because the truth is darker than any nightmare. June 1, 1928, Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, Kansas, USA. The walls were thick, cold, silent, and behind them sat a man. Still, unblinking, not restrained, not screaming, just waiting. A guard, curious more than kind, slid a pencil and paper through the iron bars. The man picked it up, nodded once, and began to write. Not letters to family. Not a plea for help. But a confession. What spilled onto those pages wasn't just crime. It was hate. Pure. Burning. Unrepentant. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't want it. He wanted the world to know what he had done. And why. This is the story of Carl Panzram. And what he wrote would become one of the darkest confessions in American history. How does a child become a monster? How do you track a killer who never wanted to be caught? And what does a man do when the only thing he trusts is pain? Carl Panzram was born in 1891, in the desolate countryside of East Grand Forks, Minnesota. The land was frozen, harsh, poor. So was his childhood. He was the youngest of 6, living on a failing farm with a father who didn't stay, and a mother too broken by life to care. By age 7, Carl was stealing. By age 11, he was drinking. By 12, the courts declared him incorrigible and sent him to the Minnesota State Training School in Red Wing, a so-called reform school. What happened there didn't reform him. I was beaten, raped, tortured, Carl would later write. I was taught how to lie, how to cheat, and how to hate. It wasn't discipline. It was destruction. Every whip of the strap. Every locked room. Every sleepless night. They didn't cure Carl's darkness. They planted it. He didn't leave that school fixed. He left broken, with a promise to break others. By his mid-teens, Carl was on the run. He stowed away on freight trains. Stole food. Weapons. Identities. He used fake names in every city: Jeff Davis, Jefferson Baldwin, John O'Leary. By 15, he was arrested for burglary. By 16, he tried to escape jail. By 17, he was sentenced to 3 years at Fort Leavenworth for larceny. There, he learned something new: how to survive inside cages. He watched, listened, adapted. When he got out, he didn't change. He escalated. Unlike others who stole for survival, Carl stole because he liked it. He burned buildings. He poisoned water supplies. He shot at random people from moving trains. Sometimes he would break into homes just to destroy everything inside. He wrote, "I believed the more I hurt others, the less I'd feel." He was right. One night in 1911, Carl broke into a home in New Haven, Connecticut. Not just any home, the private residence of former U.S. President William Howard Taft. He stole jewelry, bonds, cash, and a .45 caliber pistol. That gun would later be used in multiple murders. With the stolen money, Carl bought a yacht. Not for luxury, for luring victims. He promised desperate men jobs. Sailors, laborers, travelers. They'd climb aboard, then disappear. He would later confess to killing at least 10 men on that yacht, dumping their bodies in the water. No names. No fingerprints. No justice. Just ocean silence. Carl didn't stop in the U.S. from 1914 to 1919. He traveled to Mexico, South America, Europe, South Africa, Everywhere he went, arson, rape, robbery, murder. In Africa, he claimed to have hired a crew to raid native villages. He raped boys, killed indiscriminately, burned churches, destroyed schools. "I had no soul," he wrote. "I lost it long ago." Karl was arrested dozens of times, in multiple countries, under multiple names. Each time, he escaped. Sometimes by brute strength, bending jail bars. Sometimes by lies, pretending to cooperate. Sometimes by sheer will, waiting for the moment to kill a guard and flee. He didn't just evade justice. He mocked it. He wrote, "I break laws because they amuse me. I break men because they bore me." This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to an unbelievable true story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. Karl Panzram's childhood was marked by neglect, brutality, and betrayal. By the age of 11, he was in reform school, where he learned not rehabilitation, but hatred. As a teenager, he escaped into a life of crime, drifting from town to town, lying, stealing, and starting fires wherever he went. He didn't just break laws, he defied the very concept of morality. Now, we follow his twisted journey as it spirals into violence and murder. 1907, Montana State Reform School. Karl Panzram was 15 years old. Shackled and silent. He had been caught, again. But even locked behind iron bars, Karl wasn't planning to stay. One cold morning, before dawn, he broke a hinge from his bed frame. He filed it down against the stone wall until it became sharp enough to saw. Over the course of 2 nights, he cut through the window bars using sheer determination and rage. On the 3rd night, he slipped out into the snow, vanishing into the frozen wild. Karl had escaped. Again. This time, he didn't run away from punishment. He ran towards revenge. 1910. Near Salem, Oregon. Karl boarded a train heading south. He was 19, hardened beyond his years. In the shadows of the boxcar, he met a man. A drunk. Loud, threatening. Karl claimed the man tried to sexually assault him. And so, Karl picked up a rock, and smashed the man's skull in. He pushed the body off the moving train into the dark woods below. There were no witnesses. No police. No records. Just Karl. And his growing hunger for destruction. 1915, New York City Harbor. Karl now called himself Captain John O'Leary. He had stolen money, enough to buy a 2-masted yacht. But he didn't want to fish. Or sail. He wanted victims. He would dock at harbors and lure young men aboard, promising jobs, food, safety. But many never returned to shore. Karl later confessed, "I would get them drunk, rob them, rape them, and kill them." He dumped the bodies overboard, letting the ocean keep his secrets. The boat became a mobile killing ground. The authorities never suspected him. Because who would think a smiling captain with a handshake was a monster? New Haven, Connecticut, 1920. One night, Karl broke into a large, well-guarded house. It belonged to former U.S. President William Howard Taft. He stole cash, bonds, jewelry, and a Colt .38 revolver. Later, he said, "That gun killed at least 9 people. Maybe more." This wasn't just theft anymore. It was symbolic. Karl wasn't just lashing out at individuals. He hated society itself. He saw the president as the father figure of a corrupt system, and robbing him was revenge on everything that had failed him. 1920s, across the U.S. Karl traveled under dozens of aliases. He murdered people in Texas, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, D.C. He often used the same methods. Lure someone in with a fake promise. Get them drunk or vulnerable. Rob them. Assault them. Kill them. Leave no trace. He bragged about setting churches on fire. He claimed to have killed children. But the truth is, not every claim could be verified. Still, Police departments from multiple states began to piece together a pattern. Too late. By the time a body was found in one state, Carl was already hundreds of miles away, ready to kill again. 1923, Baltimore, Maryland. Carl was arrested for burglary under the alias Jeff Baldwin. He was sent to a federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. But Carl wasn't done. Not by a long shot. In prison, he studied the guards, learned their routines. He pretended to be cooperative. And then, he escaped. Yes, again. This time, with a stolen uniform and a calm smile, he walked right out the front gate. Carl Panzram had just humiliated the federal prison system. Carl's rage was growing. His crimes were no longer random, they were calculated, methodical, and deeply personal. He didn't want forgiveness. He didn't want understanding. He wanted chaos, and he was willing to burn the world for it. But the worst was yet to come. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to an unbelievable true story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. Angola, Africa, 1924. Carl traveled overseas. With forged papers and new clothes, he presented himself as a respectable American investor. In Angola, he worked briefly in the oil business. But it didn't last. He couldn't hide who he was. He claimed to have murdered local workers. He claimed to have burned villages. No one ever proved it. But after 6 months, Carl was deported back to the United States. Even foreign governments didn't want him. 1928, Washington, D.C. Carl was finally caught again. This time for burglary. They sent him back to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. But even behind bars, Carl refused peace. He was assigned a job in the prison laundry. His supervisor? A young man named Henry Quinn. On June 20, 1929, in broad daylight, Carl Panzram walked up behind Henry, and crushed his skull with a 20-pound iron bar. Henry died instantly. Carl didn't run. He didn't hide. He said, "I meant to kill him. Anyone that messes with me gets killed." After the murder, Carl was sentenced to death. But instead of appealing, he demanded it be carried out. He wrote, "I want to die. I hate the whole human race. I wish I could kill 1,000 more of you." While waiting on death row, a guard gave him paper and a pencil. And that's when he began to write his infamous confession. Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, 1928. Kansas. A thick silence hums through the iron corridors. Chains rattle. A cold wind slips through the tiny barred windows. Carl Panzram sits on a cot in cell 385, scribbling furiously. The pages beneath his pencil darken with the weight of memory. Carl was now a man without illusions. No longer drifting between cities or hiding behind false names. The world had caught up with him. And he had nothing left to hide. "I hate the whole damned human race," he wrote. "I am the spirit of evil. I have no soul." He didn't write for sympathy. He wrote for clarity. For truth, his truth. His memoir, scrawled in pencil from behind prison bars, became a roadmap to the darkest corners of one man's soul. Summer of 1920. Providence, Rhode Island. Carl was aboard his boat, the Akista, anchored in the bay. From the shore, it looked like an average yacht. Clean, white, elegant. But it wasn't. It was a trap. Carl used the Akista like a lure. Young men, homeless drifters, and unlucky wanderers were drawn in by promises of food, work, or escape. Many never stepped off the boat again. He later confessed, with chilling calmness, to the murder of over 10 men aboard that yacht alone. Their bodies were never recovered. Tension builds. Carl moved like a shadow across the world. New York, New Orleans, then across the ocean. Germany, France, England, South Africa. Each new place was a new hunting ground. His crimes included burglary, assault, and rape. But more than anything, murder. He claimed over 21 killings. Authorities only ever confirmed a few. The international trail baffled police. He was a man of many names, faces, and lies. The only constant, destruction. In Africa, he was arrested for stealing a gun in Luanda. He escaped. In Lisbon, he conned a ship captain out of money. In Hamburg, he burned a warehouse down just for the thrill. And in America? He kept returning, as if the soil itself called him home. Called him to finish what he had started. Karl Panzram was not a monster born overnight. His transformation was slow, forged in pain, fire, and betrayal. The reform school in Minnesota didn't rehabilitate him, it destroyed him. The guards had beaten him, violated him, humiliated him. At age 11, he made a vow. I will never forgive. I will never forget. I will hurt the world back. He kept that promise. 1928. Washington, D.C. Karl was caught trying to rob a house. This time, the police got him. His fingerprints matched. His aliases collapsed. He was sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, maximum security. Inside, Karl showed no fear, no remorse. When other prisoners complained, he laughed. When guards threatened him, he stared back with empty eyes. One day, a fellow inmate, Robert Warnke, was assigned to clean Karl's cell. A young, quiet man. Karl hated him instantly. June 20, 1929. In broad daylight, inside a prison filled with guards and locks, Karl murdered Warnke. Beat him to death with an iron bar. Cold. Methodical. Silent. I struck him until he was good and dead, he later wrote. There was no escape this time. No trick. No name to hide behind. He was sentenced to death by hanging. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to an unbelievable true story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. While waiting for execution, Karl began to write. A prison guard, Henry Lesser, saw something in him. Not hope, but truth. Lesser gave him paper, a pencil, and silence. Karl wrote over 20,000 words. He confessed to killing 21 men, sexually assaulting over 1,000 boys and men, committing hundreds of robberies and arsons. But what struck people most wasn't the crimes, it was the clarity. The cold, clean truth. I do not believe in man, God, nor devil, Karl wrote. I hate the whole damned human race, including myself. September 5, 1930. Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Karl stood on the gallows. Calm. Smiling. When the executioner asked if he had any last words, Karl said, yes. Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could have killed 10 men while you've been fooling around. The trapdoor opened. The rope snapped. Karl Panzram was gone. The pages he left behind now rest in archives. Yellowed, fragile, stained by time, but still filled with rage. His words echo louder than any scream. I was no different from you. I was just honest about it. And today, the cell he wrote in sits cold and empty. But the hate he put into the world still lingers. 1920, New York City, USA. Karl's crimes no longer had boundaries. Every new arrest, every prison, every escape, it all fed his rage. In New York, he moved with purpose, like a storm in human form. A quiet alley or a broken lock was all he needed to strike again. People didn't notice the man who walked with a slight limp and a shadow over his eyes. But inside, Karl was planning, waiting, always waiting. By now, he had committed dozens of murders, men lured with kindness, then erased without mercy. Strangulation. Blunt force. Bullets. He didn't care how. It wasn't about the method. It was about the message. He was sending a war cry to the world. For all the wrongs done to me, I will pay them back 1,000 times, Karl wrote. By 1922, Karl had racked up multiple arrests under different names: Jeff Baldwin, John O'Leary, Jefferson Davis. Each time, He gave just enough info to confuse the system, then slipped away. At one point, he was arrested in Baltimore. The police were sure they had their man for a string of burglaries. But Panzram looked them in the eyes and said calmly, "I'm just passing through. No fingerprints. No real name. No past." They let him go. That same night, he stole 2 guns, robbed a jewelry store, and left town by dawn. In 1923, Carl took his madness to Africa. Some records suggest he bribed a sailor for a job aboard a freighter. Others say he simply snuck on board. Either way, he landed in Luanda, Angola, and found a new playground. There, Carl didn't just rob or assault. He hunted. He would later confess to killing 6 locals in the jungle for sport. He described it without remorse, comparing it to hunting animals back in Minnesota. No police records exist of these crimes. No missing persons reports from colonial officials. The victims were poor, brown, and forgotten. Carl counted on that. He would later write, "I am rage. I am revenge. I am the reason why some men disappear." After a few months, he left Angola and drifted back toward Europe. 1924, the Boat of Death. In New York once again, Carl bought a yacht using money stolen from a previous heist. It was small, just big enough for a few passengers. But to him, it was perfect. He called it a kista. He used it as bait. Carl would lure young sailors, runaways, or laborers with promises of work and travel. Once they were on board, far from shore, the trap closed. He would later claim to have murdered 10 men aboard that boat. Strangled them. Shot them. Dumped them into the Atlantic. They never saw land again. Carl wrote. And no one ever came looking. Eventually, the boat drifted ashore after a storm. It was found damaged and empty. Authorities assumed it had been abandoned. They didn't know what it had been used for. I was already dead inside. Carl was arrested again in 1925. He'd been caught robbing a train station in Connecticut. This time, the authorities grew suspicious. The fingerprints. The scars. The strange calmness. He was sentenced to Clinton Prison in New York, but he didn't stay long. He escaped by sawing through the prison bars with a file he hid in his shoe. Free again, Carl became worse. No longer just a thief or a killer, he was a man with nothing left inside. "I've been a human butcher," he wrote. "And I liked it." He drifted west. Chicago. Detroit. Minneapolis. Each place, another theft. Another fire. Another disappearance. But time was running out. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to an unbelievable true story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. 1928. In Washington, D.C., Carl tried to rob a factory late at night. But something went wrong. A watchman, Robert Warnke, caught him in the act. Carl didn't hesitate. He beat Warnke with an iron bar. Robert died at the scene. Carl was caught within hours, still carrying the murder weapon. His fingerprints matched previous aliases. His face was recognized. There was no escape this time. At last, the police knew the name Carl Panzram, and what he had done. But they didn't know how far it went. Not yet. In prison, Carl was placed under maximum security. But strangely, he didn't resist. He didn't beg. He didn't lie. He simply asked for a pencil and paper. Over the next 2 months, he filled over 20,000 words with a confession so cold, so brutal, and so honest, that it chilled even the toughest prison guards. "I have no soul. No fear. No regrets. I am your creation. Now deal with me." The confession detailed over 21 murders, countless assaults, hundreds of burglaries, and escapes across 4 continents. He didn't ask for mercy. He demanded the death penalty. By the fall of 1928, Carl Panzram sat in a courtroom in Washington, D.C. not as a man pleading for his life, but as a monster daring the world to kill him. He refused legal representation. He refused to appeal. He wanted death. "I do not believe in man, God, nor devil. I hate the whole damned human race," he declared in open court. The judge, stunned, ordered a psychiatric evaluation. But the report came back: Carl was perfectly sane. He wasn't insane. He was evil. The jury found him guilty of the murder of Robert Warnke. The sentence, death by hanging. Carl smiled. While awaiting execution at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, Carl asked for pen and paper again. He wrote, "In my lifetime I have murdered 21 human beings, committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, arsons, and last but not least I have committed sodomy on more than 1,000 male human beings. For all of these things, I am not in the least bit sorry." His confession was not remorseful, it was a manifesto of vengeance. He blamed his violence on a system that brutalized him from the age of 11. But make no mistake, Carl chose evil. And now, he was choosing to die. The world was ready to turn the page on Carl Panzram. But one man wouldn't let that happen: Henry Lesser, a young Jewish prison guard. Henry saw something, not forgiveness, not redemption, but a warning. He gave Carl the paper and postage to write his story. He preserved it. He kept it hidden for years. Lesser would later say, "Carl didn't ask to be saved. He only asked to be heard." Without Henry, Carl's entire life might have died behind stone walls. But instead, it became history. September 5, 1930. On the morning of his hanging, Carl Panzram was unchained from his cell and led to the gallows inside Leavenworth. He spat in the face of the executioner. When asked if he had any last words, he snapped, "Yes. Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." They placed the noose around his neck. They pulled the lever. Carl Panzram died instantly. No mourners. No family. Just a body buried in an unmarked grave, inside Leavenworth's prison cemetery. Carl didn't want sympathy. He didn't seek forgiveness. He didn't care to be remembered. But he was remembered, because he revealed a truth we don't like to face. That evil can be created, then sharpened, by the very systems meant to stop it. Carl was beaten, raped, starved, chained, and tortured, as a boy. Then he became the thing society feared most. A man who felt nothing. A man who wanted revenge. A man who burned everything he touched. Carl once wrote, "I told you I'd make you pay. And I did." If you've made it to the end, you've just witnessed one of the darkest true stories in history. Like, share, and subscribe to an unbelievable true story, because real evil doesn't wear a mask. It wears a human face. Have you heard this story before? What do you think truly happened behind those walls? Before Ira Einhorn zipped the trunk closed? If you're drawn to real stories that stay with you, subscribe now to an unbelievable true story. Because every week, we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Watch the next video on your screen, or dive into our full playlist of real mysteries and crimes. The next story might be even more